Hello, welcome to LeadMaster. In this video, I'm going to show you how to combine the Smart Queue with quick actions and workflow to automate your business process. I have two scenarios. The first is I'd like all new leads to go into a new lead Smart Queue and to remain there until we establish contact with them. The second is anyone that I haven't spoken to, any of my contacts, whether they're leads or customers, that I haven't spoken to in the last 60 days, add them to a 60-day Smart Queue. So let's take a look. Right now I've got three Smart Queues. I've got the new leads Smart Queue, the no contact for 60 days Smart Queue, and the general Smart Queue. Let's begin by taking a look at the new leads Smart Queue. For this queue, it's fairly straightforward. I say simply that the lead status is equal to new lead. So anytime the lead status is equal to new lead, it will appear in this queue. Let's take a look at the workflow. So here's a workflow for adding new records. Whenever I add a new record, always, I update the lead status to new lead. Now, workflow doesn't work for importing records. So if I'm importing records, all I need to do is add a new column and give every contact a lead status of new lead and then import that. So let's go back and take a look at our Smart Queues again. The new leads queue now has 9 records in it. In a moment, we're going to go into the new lead queue and we're going to mark it that it's no longer a new lead. And we'll come back and we'll see that this now has 8 in it. So the new lead queue is fairly straightforward. But what about no contact for 60 days? How are we going to manage that? The first thing I look at is that I need a field to understand the contact status. So I need to create a reference table with contact status. Let's take a look at that. Here's the reference table for the contact status. I have 3 basic statuses: not yet contacted, no contact in the last 60 days, and contacted in the last 60 days. Now let's see how that works with workflow. Going back to the very first workflow, all new records, you'll notice that not only do we set the lead status in here, but we also set the contact status to not yet contacted. We have 2 other workflows to control whether something appears in the has not been contacted for 60 days Smart Queue. Let's take a look. The first sets the contact status if contact is made. So I have 3 checkboxes or quick actions that I use to indicate whether or not contact has been made. An appointment was scheduled, or a demo was completed, or simply phone call was checked. If any of those 3 are checked in my quick actions, I'm going to update the status to say contacted in the last 60 days. That is going to work in conjunction with the next workflow. When contacted in the last 60 days and contact status was updated, so in other words, when any of those 3 quick actions were checked and the record was updated to say contacted, it's going to fire this workflow. And this workflow is going to behave as follows. The very first thing it's going to do is reset the contact status to not yet contacted. And that's because as a result of the task, it's either going to say there was no contact in the last 60 days or yes, there was contact in the last 60 days. So let's take a look at this in detail, this task. Here's our task. And normally this would say 60 days. but for the purposes of this video, I'm setting it to 6 minutes. After I update the record, I'll pause the video, and then we'll take a look and see how that's changed our smart cues. So the task is considered complete. So the task, once again, to say I've made contact, is either an appointment was scheduled, or a demo was completed, or simply the phone call box was checked. When the task has not been completed, this is what we do. We change it to no contact in the last 60 days. When the task has been completed, we say, yes, contacted in the last 60 days. Now remember, when we change the contact status to contacted in the last 60 days, that goes back to reset the timer. And so this timer essentially works in a continuous fashion. That if I update the record to say no contact in the last 60 days, it goes to the smart queue. If I update the record to say yes, I have contacted, then remember, the contact status was set to not yet contacted. And so when I update the record to say contacted in the last 60 days, it fires this workflow again. The contact status equals contacted in the last 60 days and was updated. It goes back into this and resets it for 0 to 60 days. So every time I update the record to say, yes, contacted in the last 60 days, it resets this timer and it begins the countdown again. We always have someone in the queue if they have not been contacted in the last 60 days. Now, let's go into our queues and see how they work. So here I am in a new lead queue. And let's say that I have made contact, and so I'm going to say info is required. And I placed a phone call to that person. Our contact status has been updated because I placed a phone call. So, what's happening? My new leads will be reduced from 9 to 8. And in fact, that'll happen immediately. And in 6 minutes, the no contact for 60 days queue will be incremented by 1. Let's take a look at our smart queues. So previously, the lead status was 9 as far as the number of people. It is now 8. Right now, I have 3 in no contact for 60 days. I'm going to pause the video and come back in a few minutes, and what we'll see is that the total number of records has been increased to 4 based upon our workflow updating the contact to say that they've just been contacted, and then 6 minutes expiring so that that person will be moved to the no contact for 60 days queue. I'll be back in a minute. Okay, I'm back. It's been a few more than 6 minutes, but let's click this search button here to get us an up. I have to reload my smart cues in order to do that. There we go. We now have 4 records in that queue. So our workflow automatically moves things in and out of the new lead queue. And anytime we haven't contacted anyone for 60 days, it automatically puts them in the no contact last 60 days queue. A couple of final thoughts on this. Let's go back to the home page and let's go to the smart queue. So here's the record that was in our new lead queue and is now in the no contact for 60 days queue. And you'll notice that it says no contact for the last 60 days. That's because it was automatically reset and now it's in the no contact for 60 days queue. Additionally, there are 2 ways to configure the new lead button. One is that it simply advances the record without updating it. The second is that it advances the record and updates it. So let's say that I place a phone call. It's going to drop it out of the no contact for 60 days queue. It'll change the contact status. It'll update the record and advance it. So you'll see up here in a moment that it says record updated. And then it will advance to the next record. And here's our next record. Now if I come back here to my Smart Queue, you'll see that this now has 3 instead of 4. Now let's take a look at the new lead queue. I have 8 records in there. You'll recall that when I add a record manually, or when I import them, it's going to add them to the new lead queue. Right now, I don't have an automation set up to change the lead status, although I certainly could. In this case, I drop it out of the lead queue just by simply changing the lead status by hand. I can either click Update or Get Next Lead. Now when I take a look at my lead queues, my Smart Queue, my new lead queue is down to 7. This concludes the video on combining the Smart Queue, quick actions, and workflow to manage your business process.